Okay, great. Hey, all of you who are on with us today, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. We are charting uncharted territory now with this situation we're in with the COVID-19 virus, and so that precludes us from meeting in person. That for me is the real downside of this, because I really like the opportunity to be in front of people, to visit with them and to interact with them before and after the meetings. And because we're doing this as a virtual program doesn't mean we still can answer your questions and take care of the things that you have. I think Adam went through all the specifics of the class to be able to tell you how to, you need to unmute. All your lines are muted so that everybody doesn't hear all the background noise, but if you do have a question, you can unmute that on your computer. I will be, at the end of the class, be taking questions, and so make sure as you go through, you write down those questions and maybe make a little note or bend the corner of your page over to ask those questions. When you get through with this class today, you will have completed your 3-hour education class. That will be, the state is getting their portion ready to go on April 1st. They will have the portal ready for us to enter all the people who took the education class from us. That will show you giving credit for that. I will say that we're working, the association is working with the tax commission on helping dealers renew their license, so that we might be able to help you with some of those renewal issues you may have, and making sure that your bond and your insurance and all those things are in place, and making sure that you can complete your renewal of your dealer license. So with that, I hope that you will now open your packet or look on your packet online, and I will walk you through that. The first page on the inside obviously is about the association, and without the association, all these things that we're talking about couldn't be done. And so those of you who are members of the association, thank you for joining, and thank you for your input during the session and other times when my team is out there, of you giving them input and giving them information on some of the issues that you're facing, whether it be in a local jurisdiction or with the tax commission. That's how we're able to solve problems as an association, to hear from each of you. On the next page is a table of contents. Those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. Let me just talk about, on the next page talks about IDS and the association a little bit. Let me just give you a quick update of some things that have happened even as recently as this weekend. The Tax Commission, for your information, is closing all of their offices to any walk-ins for the public. Unless the Tax Commission office, the DMV, has a drive-up window. That's the only way the public will be able to be served now, is through a drive-up window where they can do renewals or whatever types of business they have. They're highly recommending, and if people are asking you, highly recommend that they go online. All renewals can be done online. And in fact, about 30% of the work of the Tax Commission is on renewals that could be done online, instead of somebody standing in line or going to directly to the DMV. How does that affect dealers? Dealers cannot walk packets into the DMV anymore. If you have a packet that you need to get to the Tax Commission, you can call the Tax Commission office, the DMV office of your choice that is still open, and they will meet you at the door, or come to your vehicle actually, and they will pick that packet up from your dealership, and then they will call you when that's done. I will tell you that some of you are in need of doing emergency walks. IDS at all 3 of our offices are open to do emergency walks. So if you have a title that is hitting the 45 days, excuse me, you will be able to drop that to our office. We have some procedures in our office. When you go to your office, we will have a desk and a box for you to be able to sign your work in, to tell us how you're going to pay for that, as far as the tax numbers, the Tax Commission numbers. And then when that work is completed, we will call you and we will bring that work out to your office. If you need supplies and any kind of forms during the next 30 days or so, you will, all you need to do is order those online or go to our website. or you can still pick them up at our office, but you'll need to call ahead so we can put that order together for you, and then we will bring that order out to you when you arrive at the office. Call us and we will bring that order out to your vehicle. So where our plans are for the next 30 days with all the things that have taken place with the stay-in-place actions that are being done both on a federal and a state level, that we can still have dealerships operating for that. So make sure that you practice all those safe things as you deal with our offices, of making sure your hands are washed. We do have sanitizer at the offices, and we're doing all we can to make sure everybody is safe. The other service that may be of interest, and we've seen a lot of change in that, is we have the ability to be able to process your plates and then mail them directly to your customers. So that would eliminate you needing even to come to our office to pick that back up. And then we will send your receipts and everything back to the back to your dealership. But we can mail those plates directly to your customer, and just making sure that that is there. If you look in your book on page Roman numeral 5, just a couple of things to remind you. One of the things we feel very strongly about our classes, this is not a class just to fill the requirement for your 3-hour class, but this is a class that offers solutions so to make sure that these changes you can make those in your dealership and make sure you're staying legal, so you're not going to have any legal problems down the road. I do remind you that we're not attorneys here, but we do have legal services available for you. And one of the things that our main goal is with the association is to raise the level of professionalism in our industry, and we think that's very important that each of us invest in our profession to make sure that that's the case. On page 6, it talks about our antitrust statement. We don't need to worry too much about that because you as dealers are not all here in the same room, but where you can still ask questions and make comments. We still cover our antitrust disclosure statement about boycotting and price fixing and some of those kinds of things. On page 7 is our copyright policy. We have a list of all the copyrighted forms, and there's a couple new ones that we're adding to that deal with a recall notice, as well as advanced driving system notification, which we're going to talk about today. Excuse me. On page 8 is our 3 locations. So if you do need to bring title work to our office, the title work can be dropped at our main office in Midvale or our Ogden or Orem office, and all those rules and processes we just talked about will apply to each one of those. We also included, because some dealers are needing some legal help during this time, we included the insurance people, our Vernon Group, for our process for dealer insurance, as well as SEB Legal, who we refer people to when there is a need for some legal updates. So on the next page is some of our newer programs that we have available for the dealers to help save you money. You can look at those on your own. Before I get into the bills on page 1, excuse me, which is several pages in, I just wanted to let you know that with all the changes going on with this COVID-19 virus that's going on, we need to make sure that everybody knows some of the things that are going on with that. A couple of things I wanted to make you aware of. Excuse me, got a little bug in my throat this morning. A couple of things that we wanted to make you aware of is that the governor, as you may or may not know, has formed an economic task force. Our association is one of only a few that have been invited to participate in that task force. We are on regular communication with the governor's office for dealing with all the things that are going to be coming up with this COVID virus and what can and can't be done. This is a plan that the governor has put together for the health and economic recovery of the state of Utah, and we're very honored to be a part of that with the governor's office. I wanted to let you know that there's basically 3 phases of that. There's an urgent phase, which we're in right now, and that's to suppress the virus as much as possible. And the second phase will be a stabilization phase, and then the next one is a recovery phase, and that will all be dealing with the economic things. And so we'll be very involved with the goal of the governor to get business back to where it is. I appreciate his comment about it. He says it's times like these that bring out the best in people. This is the time for Utah to shine, and if everybody will do their part, we can get through this virus pretty quickly. So we ask you to make sure you're following all those things about maintaining distance and using hand sanitizer. The car dealerships are considered, both on a state and federal level, a essential business in the economy, and as such, at this point, you have not been directed to close your doors. So you can still keep your doors open. People can still come to your dealership. We don't know when that will change. It may change, but the automotive industry right now is considered an essential part of the process that is going on out there in making sure that some of the economy can continue to proceed. Let's get into the issues with the legislation that passed this year. This year there were a little over 500 bills that were passed. Not as many this year affected motor vehicle. We were able to keep that at a minimum this year. I will tell you, as you get into, on page 1, it talks about the primary bills. Any of these bills can be looked up if you go to le.utah.gov. That's the state legislative site. And I would highly encourage you, when you go to that site, to find out who your legislators are, find out who your House and Senate members are here at the state capitol. We're not talking federal, but on the state side, and get to know who they are, because as those things come about, we have a lot of things that are going to be coming up again next year that we're going to be working on through the summer and into the fall, that we're going to need the input of dealers and them contacting their legislators. So get to know who that is, and make sure that you are able to let us know, for those you know in the legislature. We want to make sure that one of the things that has come up in your page 1, it talks about the Tax Reconstruction and Equalization Task Force. This was the task force that we talked about last year that has to do with taxes, and particularly sales tax on trade-ins. That, as you know, we were able to keep that out of the tax bill that passed in special session last year. This is the one that had to do with the sales tax on food and a myriad of other tax issues. But we were able to keep out the sales tax exemption repeal out of that. Since then, though, if you look at House Bill 185 there, it talks about an effective date. And by the way, all these bills have effective dates on them, so you can see when they go into effect. But January 28th, that was a couple of days ago, this bill went into effect that repealed what the legislature did with the tax task force as they met, and basically undid everything that was done in that special session bill, including the sales tax on food. What that means is that we're going to have to, again, watch that very carefully as an industry to make sure we aren't targeted with some of these sales tax exemptions that we currently enjoy and that keeps our economy going as far as dealerships are concerned, and we'll be watching that very carefully. On all of these bills that we're talking about, it gives the title of the bill and who the sponsors were, and it also gives the effective date for these. You can see that as you look at the bills. The first bill that I want to talk about on page 1, at the bottom page 1, is House Bill 49. That bill clarifies some of the out-of-state sales tax collection when somebody purchases a vehicle using the internet. We don't sell cars on the internet, we just offer them for sale, and the process takes place there. When this bill addresses the issue of when a person buys a vehicle from a dealer that is not domiciled in the state and does not have a physical business location here in the state, that the sales tax still has to be included and collected by that state, and they must remit it to the state tax commission. This is good for us in the standpoint that sales tax can be collected on every vehicle, and people aren't going to be purchasing vehicles out of state just because they want to avoid the sales tax. So this will actually help the playing field pretty directly for all the dealers here in Utah, so that the rules are the same whether the dealer was in state or out of state. Over on page 2 talks about boards and commissions. This was a really important bill for the association. In the state of Utah, we have approximately a little over 400. There's 400 plus commissions and boards. And the legislature wanted to say, we're going to do away with all of them. Well, you can see on the list there that we have our Motor Vehicle Business Advisory Board, Motor Vehicle Review Committee, Off-Highway Vehicle Advisory Board, and Power Sport Motor Vehicle Committee. All of those would have been eliminated All of these committees have a great function for the industry in making sure that we address issues with the state. And so we ask that they be put on a sunset list, which means that down the road in 2 or 3 years, they're going to review each of these, and each of those review boards and commissions will have to justify their existence. We don't have a hard time dealing with that. This is the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Advisory Board that's appointed by the governor. We have a member that sits on that addresses motor vehicle issues. So it was important for us to make sure we maintain that relationship with the governor's office and the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division. And they, by the way, have been great to work with during the past years, and seen some great things happen with that. On page 2, I'm not going to go through all of these details, but on the bottom of page 2, House Bill 366, this is called Utah Alternate Dispute Process for ADA Complaints. The reason this was addressed is because there's a group of people who are going around and checking every business, a lot of businesses, not every, but a lot of businesses in the state of Utah that are not compliant with American Disabilities Act. And what this bill does is set forth a process for that, to be able to say that they can't just come in and sue you, that they have to notify you, that they're going to, before they can file a civil action. Then it gives you an opportunity to fix those ADA non-compliant issues if that's the case. It also puts in here that there are penalties if you are notified of that violation, that if you don't do something about it, then they can still seek civil action. And it also, the other thing that this does is eliminate some of the attorney fees and things that they can charge, so that it's not going to put a dealer out of business because he may not be 100% ADA compliant and try and catch you at something. So our suggestion for compliance with this bill is make sure you go out and review your dealership physical facility and make sure you are compliant with ADA, with the Disabilities Act, and making sure that people have access to your dealership, or a process in place that will be able to accommodate those people who have disabilities. If you go to page 4, safety inspection again was on the list of things that that was discussed. This Senate Bill 31, which goes into effect May, started out with eliminating some of the issues concerning safety inspection and what had to be safety inspected, such as commercial vehicles and salvage vehicles and street legal, and some of those things that deal with the vehicles that are requiring safety inspection. They wanted to do away with those safety inspections as well, but as it ended up, this bill morphed into, and in fact, let me just back up one step. We as an association suggested that they add any time that a vehicle changes ownership, that the vehicle be safety inspected. I know many of the dealers, of our member dealers, are doing their own safety inspection or state safety inspection. We think that's an integral part of making sure that the vehicle you're selling to your customer is compliant with the law. But this bill, basically what it ended up being is that it gives a person who may be cited by the highway patrol or any other police jurisdiction has 14 days to fix those things, and then they have to present a certificate to the highway patrol that they have complied with those safety changes. So if they got cited for brakes or lights or windshield or tint or any of those types of things, they have 14 days to be able to take care of those. In the past, it was 5 days. They extended that time to 14 days. If those who are cited do not fix those things that are required, then the Highway Patrol, Department of Public Safety, will notify the DMV for the cancellation of that registration. So even though the registration may be current, it could get canceled because they haven't taken care of those safety issues. We expect that safety inspection will be on the agenda again next year. I've already talked to a couple of people who said we want to bring some of the things that you discussed in making safe vehicles on the road back, and so I'm sure this will be a discussion again next year. Page 5 is Senate Bill 120. We spent a lot of time on this bill. It has to do with salvage and salvage notification. This notification process has to do with a vehicle that would be branded with any type of a brand. That branding actually can be done in a number of ways, but if you look at the bottom of page 5, it talks about there has to be language in each contract, your motor vehicle contract, that or sales contract or a lease contract, if the vehicle is salvaged, and there has to be a form affixed that the customer knew that form was or that vehicle had a branded vehicle, was a branded vehicle. We currently have part of that in place right now. You'll see on page 6 there's some new language there that says that a salvage or a total loss vehicle for resale has to have a disclosure put on it. In this case, they talk about it as a warning. One of the things that we worked on with this bill is they wanted only dealers to have to do this, to give the notice for a branded title, but we changed the word to set any seller of a vehicle. So even a private party has to disclose to the person they're selling it to that this vehicle may have a branded title. You're all familiar probably with, I have a copy here in my hand, I'm sure you can't see it, but this is the salvage disclosure form that is required on every vehicle that has a title brand. This is something that motor vehicle enforcement is looking at when they come to your dealership. They will ask you if you have a vehicle that has a brand or a salvage title. And if you identify one on your lot, they're going to walk out and see if this TC 814 form is attached. This is required to be in the lower left-hand corner, in other words, the passenger side of the vehicle, so that the customer knows that that vehicle has a branded title. This new language on page 6, we're working with the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division currently to incorporate all of this new language in that TC 814, so that disclosure can be all accomplished in one disclosure, including this language and the language from the TC 814 form. The second part of this bill has to do with the new systems that are coming on cars called advanced driver assistance. These are the systems that are notify you when you're doing lane change, you're drifting out of your lane, or the emergency stopping provisions. A lot of that new technology is incorporated into a windshield. I didn't know that until this legislation came up, that that's what the technology was covering in windshields. And what this legislation does is provide that a notice be given to the consumer, or the consumer give a notice that if they replace their windshield and they do not have the recalibration performed on that vehicle, that there has to be a disclosure take place on the when that vehicle is sold or changed of ownership. So the recalibration, if the facility can't recalibrate that, then they have to notify the consumer. If it's going to be covered by insurance and the cost of that insurance is covered, then the insurance company provider has to notify the person that they're going to cover all or part of that. So there's disclosure on the insurance side, as well as a person who does not get that recalibrated. If you turn to page 8, you'll see the specific language that addresses actual knowledge of an advanced driver system notification. It says if it's inoperable in paragraph 6 that I bolded out for you. If it has not been repaired or recalibrated after the glass repair or replacement is described, may not knowingly sell that without providing written notice to the purchaser that it hasn't been fixed, or that it's, and if they don't do that, there's a civil penalty of $500. And also there can be civil action for failure to provide the notice of triple damages or $1,500. So you can see this is a very important thing. We will be having a new, it sounds like there's a question, we will be having a new disclosure form that will be available to dealers to be able to disclose this to the customer, not only for the customer to disclose to you when they trade that in, but also the disclosure will disclose, you can use that to disclose to your new customer. So sounds like we have a question. Go ahead, whoever that is.
Yeah, the question is, how about the rebuild, restore titles? Do we still, do we still have to, notify the people, or because it's already passed, the safety of being fixed and all that?
Yes, so let me restate that, the question, so everybody's clear, make sure everybody heard that. The question is whether we do a rebuilt, restored. So I'm talking about any vehicle that is branded. And a rebuilt, restored is a title brand. Okay, it's a type of a brand. Sometimes they come from different states, junk cars or rebuilt, restored, or salvage vehicle. There's over 200 title brands across the country. So it doesn't matter what terminology. If there's a specific brand on that title, you have to disclose that to the customer, and the customer is required for them to disclose that to you. So when you have somebody trading a vehicle in, you'll notice on the back of the motor vehicle contract, it talks about that they understand that that the vehicle does not have a brand, and they're disclosing that. But if it does have a brand, then we're going to have a disclosure form for them to disclose it to you, and then that you can disclose it to the person if you turn around and retail that to another customer, that disclosure is taken care of. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thanks for the question. It was a good question as we go along. And where we don't have a lot of people on, if any of you want to ask some questions as we go along today, that's fine. So that new disclosure will be available. This bill, if you look at the effective date, goes into effect on May 20th. So we will be having that probably around the first part of May. We will have that available for the dealers in our offices, and you can order those in the usual procedure that you do. Okay, over on the bottom of page 8 is vehicle rental amendments. This has to do with, this is really just a housekeeping bill for those who rent vehicles. I know I have some of my members who do rent used cars and so forth, but this clarifies in the code that they can actually do the driver's license verification electronically. There were some questions on that, so that was really a fix-it bill. Those are the bills that we really focused on this year, and we really spent a lot of time to make sure they were right so that it was manageable for the dealerships to do that. On page 9, we put a list of bills that were either killed or not passed. Some of those bills were killed by us or other entities. The first one is a bill on House Bill 123. This is Vehicle Property Tax Amendment. As you remember, over the last 3 years, we've had this same bill, and this bill basically deals with the age-based fee that we have a legislator in Utah County that said, hey, if that vehicle has the age-based fee paid, that I want credit for whatever it is. So if I buy that car in the middle of the year, why should I have to pay that? As all of you know, the age-based fee is charged every time a vehicle is sold. You don't get a pro rata credit because they paid it in April and there's still months left on that vehicle on the age-based fee. So the county assessors don't like this bill. They were instrumental in making sure that this bill didn't go forward. But we will still be working on that again for some possible solutions, because we know that Representative Thurston will be back with this bill again next year, and we're looking at some possible solutions with him. One of those things is that if somebody buys a car if somebody sells their car and they have just paid their age-based fee, like within the last 6 months, that they could apply for a refund directly from the tax commission. As long as the dealers are kept out of that process, I think that's something that we would look at. But there are discussions going on for that. So if you think that's a good idea, please let us know. But one thing we want to make sure of is that we keep us out of that process of applying for refunds for people. Further down on page 9, House Bill 126, this is a bill that was presented that would allow for licensed motor vehicle salesmen to work for more than one dealership. We saw some really problems, a lot of problems with this process. In years past, many years ago, this was a big problem in our industry, where a salesman would sign himself up for a lot of different dealerships and go sell vehicles, and then there was a problem with determining who, in fact, that dealer was actually acting for. So with the problems were there, this bill actually did not pass, but will be discussed again. The discussion had to do mostly with fleet sales with new car dealerships, that their fleet managers, if they had multiple lines like Chevy and Ford and Dodge, and they had somebody wanting to come and buy a fleet of vehicles of Chevys, Fords, and Dodges, they would have to work with 3 different fleet managers for that. And so those issues are still going to be discussed, and we'll see where that goes next year. On the bottom, page 9, is the window tinting bill. It also talked about reducing the opacity for windows from the current 35% to 25%. This bill did not pass. the widows group that are part of the police union are very much against this because they want to be able to have their officers be able to see in the vehicles for unsafe conditions. I will tell you that one of the things you need to be careful of as a dealer is making sure you are not selling vehicles that are not safe. This would include glass, it would include tires, it would include lift kits, windshields. One of the processes the Highway Patrol went through last year regarding safety inspections, they did a visual inspection, which is kind of a pretty weak way to do it, but they did a lot of visual inspection standing outside on the street, looking at vehicles for sale on a dealership's lot and determining that there were a certain percentage that they felt would not pass that had like bad windows or tires or tinting. And that's where a lot of the concern from the public safety side of this safety inspection issue are coming from. So all the dealers, all of you need to make sure that the vehicles you're selling comply. We are required by statute to sell safe vehicles. How you determine that is your process, whether you do your own inspection process or use a state inspection station to do it. That's determined by you, but the fact remains is you still have to sell a safe vehicle, even though we're not required to do that as part of the registration process. If you turn over to page 10 on the next bill, Senate Bill 177 has to do with small claims courts. This bill didn't pass. It basically ran out of time. It basically increases the amount of an action in small claims court, and I wanted to get input from the dealers. I would like you to respond at some point. Send me an email or text, or any of my team members, or if you're in your office, talk to us about this. It basically increases the claims amount action in small claims court from $11,000 cap to a $20,000 cap. I can see some advantages and disadvantages for both sides. Sometimes small claims courts are easier to deal with as far as costs for a dealer, but sometimes small claims courts judges, which are made up usually by the city attorney staff, sometimes don't know all the things that are involved in small claims process. So I need some input back on that because I'm sure that bill will be back up again for next year. Senate Bill 182 had to do with scrap metal dealers. It talks about prohibiting a dealer. In this case, the definition of a dealer is a dealer who is purchasing scrap metal that whoever turned in a catalytic converter for a vehicle had to show ownership of the vehicle that it came off of. There were some problems with. Conceptually, it might be a good idea to help stop some of the thefts that are going on, particularly at car dealerships where they're coming in and cutting those out. The thieves would not be able to convert those into cash unless they could verify ownership of the vehicle it came off of. And then on the bottom of page 10 talks about impound fees. This bill is actually worse for notification. It allowed 2 business days instead of storage could be again charged on a vehicle that was impounded. That's particularly important for the buy here, pay here dealers. And so that bill did not pass. There are a couple of things that we watched that some passed and some didn't on page 11. This talks about credit reporting, and this applies also to pretty much buy here, pay here dealers that deals with a creditor who's providing notice if there is a negative or they have to get consent from that person for doing electronic notification if there's a credit issue when they apply for credit. And they have to, and as a dealer, you will need to do that within a 30-day time period, and there has to be notice to the customer that that is being reported. And that's really not much different than what you're required to do now, except that it clarifies some of that provision in the current law. On the bottom, page 11, is a fix-it ticket bill that has to do with registration. If you're driving a vehicle down the road and your registration is expired and you get a citation for that, it allows a person 14 days to be able to fix that deficiency and take that in, and the ticket would be dismissed. So it becomes a fix-it ticket on that registration violation. On page 12, on House Bill 120, this is a towing fee for those of you who do towing. There could be an increase in the towing charges that a municipality talk about. The bill allowing a special service district. That is, service district is typically a county or a state or a township, but a government entity, to be able to charge a dispatch fee. And that could be, and some of them already do, but this puts into code that they can charge a dispatch fee, and each one of them can charge that, and it has to be part of the towing rotation in the special service district. On page 165, or excuse me, on House Bill 165 on page 12, talks about telephone and fax solicitation. This deals with unsolicited and prohibitions against unsolicited phone calls. I know many of you do telephoning and so forth with some of your past customers. You need to make that sure you are in compliance with the Solicitation Act and making sure that you have permission for being able to contact those persons you have sold vehicles to. And that also remind you about your requirement to notify the customer of who you share their non-public personal information about. When you're collecting non-public personal information, that's anything other than name, address, and phone number, that you have to give them a disclosure that says who you're going to share it with, and they can allow or disallow some of that information to be shared with other sources. So make sure in your marketing, you review your marketing and what you're doing with your dealership as far as telephone solicitations. Bottom page 12 is a follow-up from last year's bill on electronic driver's license for people to be able to have a driver's license on their cell phone. They don't have to physically carry that. And so that starts the process with the Department of Motor Vehicle Driver's License Division to be able to develop a electronic driver's license. On page 13, there's several emission bills that took place. First one is more of a housekeeping bill, but it does exempt, and there's more and more electric vehicles coming on the marketplace, particularly used. It exempts an electric motor vehicle from emission compliance fee. In the past, even though it was, they were still charging a compliance fee, this now says that they can't, and exempts electric vehicles from paying that fee. So this goes into effect January 1 of 2021, and we will be updating that with all the members of the association and giving you an updated registration fee schedule, this will identify electric vehicles in. On bottom of page 13 is electric charging station infrastructure. The state is really pushing to have more electric charging stations in the state. This one is directed at electrical corporations and public utilities and allowing them to be able to set up those electronic stations. On page 14, however, it does expand that to the private market with private entities where they can put in statewide charging stations, and the legislature appropriated a number of millions of dollars for either through public entity or a private entity to expand the electronic network, which would include places where tourism takes place, such as our national parks and some of our state parks, where they will now expand that electrical grid past the main corridor of I-15 and I-80. House Bill 176, you remember we talked about last year, this same subject came up. It had to do with kind of I'll call it a cash for clunkers. I even hate to say that word because people jump all over that. But basically it would allow a person whose vehicle didn't pass emissions testing that they could get a tax credit, both a state and a federal tax credit. There's a federal tax credit already in place that can be taken care of, but this would have added state money, in the state this year with the lean budget they had and some of these issues with their main budget, this bill did not pass. Every year we have a number of new plates that are available for consumers. The first one is a veteran's license plate. There were some changes there, and that didn't pass mostly because of time. But the second one on there, HB 287, there was a push to be able to have a disabled veteran license plate park in a handicapped parking stall. And because of national implications on the ADA and the American Disabilities Act, that bill did not pass. There is now a plate that did pass. It's the Martin Luther King special plate, and then also a Clean Air special plate, as well as on the top of page 15, a Latino community plate called a special group license plate that has to do with the Latino community. So those are 3 more plates we add to our big long list of specialty plates that are out there that will be available to your customers should they choose. Senate Bill 97 on page 15 deals with this issue that's been in the news a lot. Has to do with the division being able to refuse certain letters and numbering on plates. This is a clarification that they can't issue a license plate that is detrimental to certain classes of citizens out there based on their religion or sexual preference or any of those other things that that could be considered as a protected class. The bottom of page 15, this license plate position, we were pleased that we were able to kill this plate bill. This did not pass. Basically what this did is, just to clarify for everybody, in the state of Utah, you're required to have a front license plate. Whether there's a place to put it or not, you're required to do that. But if you don't put one on, a policeman cannot pull you over and cite you just for that. It becomes what's called a secondary offense. And so if you're pulled over for speeding, they could certainly cite you for not having a plate on the front of your vehicle. Typically, that's not the case, particularly if there's no place to put it. But this bill would have undone that, where it would require that it be a primary offense. You'll see that the lined out language, when you see lined out language in legislation, it means it deletes it from the code, and this would have deleted that penalty as a second class action and would have made it a primary action that a police officer could pull you over and cite you for that. On page 16 talks about RV, a couple of RV and marine things. This first one that I want to talk about has to do a little bit with franchise law, but I know a number of our dealers are selling utility trailers. And basically what this bill did is pulled utility trailers out of the Franchise Act. It put some definitions in there, and you'll see that I highlighted that a little bit, where it talks about a trailer that is not designed for human habitation. So we're talking about utility trailers, and those trailers are basically the trailers between 750 pounds and 26,000 pounds. So trailers under 750 pounds are not included in that. Those would be the trailers like you see at Home Depot or Lowe's that are the single axle small trailers. They are not concerning this. Basically what it did is took the trailer franchise law and the motor vehicle franchise law and took trailers out of the franchise law and moved them over to motor vehicle code. There are a number of things under motor vehicle under prohibitive acts, which are all listed on page 17, but it talks about still giving relevant market protection to a trailer dealer who is selling new trailers, and depending on the population of the county, whether the relevant market area is 15 miles or 10 miles. And so that was included and put back in there. What I'm asking for, if you turn over to page 18, I put some code references of those you are selling small trailers. And the trailers, we're talking any trailers that are between 750 pounds and 26,000 pounds, that you go to these code references that I have listed there, because next year there will be a bill to do some cleanup on this, and I need the involvement of the trailer industry to help us put this together. This would also include boat dealers who are selling trailers. They are also licensed as small trailer dealers. So if you are selling trailers, make sure that you look those over and get back to us with some clarification. Excuse me just a minute. Okay, on page 18, House Bill 212. This was a bill that we have been trying to, an issue that we've been trying to resolve for a number of years, and that's where people are buying expensive vessels and motorhomes and travel trailers and setting up LLCs. They're residents of the state of Utah, but they're going to Montana and other places that have lower taxes and registering those vehicles in those states. This bill puts some language together that does not allow a person who is a resident of the state of Utah to be able to do that in, for example, the state of Montana. And so that way the state is not losing out on the sales tax and the property taxes. Last year, under motorhomes, we changed the age-based fee to a reasonable amount for motorhomes, and as such, that allows a motorhome dealer to be able to inform the customer that they can no longer set that up. Now, there could be some legitimate situations that come up. We are working right now with the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division to see how the enforcement of this is going to take place, and whether they're going to be coming back to the dealers or they're going to be going directly to the consumers who still want to break the law and take care of that. I put in here on the bottom of page 18 and top page 19 of what a resident is and what a resident isn't, because there are differences in that. For example, if you're a resident of the state of Utah, you have a driver's license, you file taxes, that's pretty obvious. But there are some things that are not considered residents, such as students, educational or religious services, tax-exempt organizations, and so on and so forth. And there's time periods that fall into that. On page 20 is the Power Sport and Auto Franchise Act. This bill was not heard, but basically this was a bill to add motorboats and vessels to the franchise law, to the Power Sport franchise law. This bill will be back up next year, and so those of you who do sell boats, I need to have you contact me and see what your thoughts are about including motorboats to the Power Sport Franchise Act. House Bill 463 on halfway down page 20 deals with vehicle, boat, and trailer registrations. This was a bill that said that they wanted to allow for multiple year registrations on a vehicle. So if I knew if I had like a 5-year finance contract on my vehicle, and I knew I was going to keep it for 5 years, I could go ahead and pay a 5-year registration and age-based fees and all of that together. The question became up of what if I decide now to sell that, can I get a credit back for that? Those are the details that are going to have to be worked out to that. And we think that we need to push that again back to the tax commission for having the tax commission issue any type of credits or refunds to the customer for that. Again, if you have any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear on your thoughts on multiple year registration. Some senses, it makes a lot of sense that if I know I'm going to keep my vehicle for 2 or 3 years, why can't I prepay that even at a discount? House Bill 255 has to do with boating fees. This deals with Aquatic Invasive Species Act, where it's trying to keep those aquatic species, invasive species, out of our Utah waters. They're going to add a $20 fee for people who launch boats in Utah, both residents and non-residents. And it also requires, you look at the top of page 21, it does require a person to remove all plugs and similar devices in vessels. You can't just pull it out and keep your plugs in. It requires you to do that. And then it also allows latitude for the division to inspect those vehicles. And it also provides that a person, before they launch, a non-resident or that has to pay the fee, but they also have to complete an education program for that, knowing what is involved. On the bottom of page 21, it talks about a recreation vehicle tax. This is on short-term rentals. If you're in the business of renting ATVs or side-by-sides, any of those types of things, there's now a tax up to the maximum of 7%. That can be, if you turn the page over, it gives you the detail on page 22 that allows the seller to charge that tax. You're going to have to, tax can't be larger than 7%, but also it allows the seller, in this case a dealer, to be able to retain a percentage of that sales tax, the same percentage of retention that you get selling vehicles. So that bill passed as well. So that in a pretty quick nutshell talks about all the bills that we dealt with, and you can see by the list of things that we went through that it is really important that the association be a part of this legislative process and working with the tax commission, working with motor vehicle enforcement, and working with the Department of Commerce. Let me just mention a couple things that have come forward from the tax commission, particularly the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division. The Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division is totally funded by temporary permits. And temporary permits, as you know, have varied in cost over the last 4 or 5 years. You've seen them go up as high as $13 and some change, and down as far as $10, $9, and they've fluctuated back and forth. And that's because the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division has done a great job in keeping those so that they're not building a great big slush fund, and they're keeping that reasonable for the businesses that purchase those, being the dealers. One of the things with the change with the COVID-19 virus is that car sales, and I'm sure all of you are totally aware of, we are not going to see the same level of dealer sales that we've seen in the past in temporary permit sales. So We received a notice from the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division on the 26th of March that there will be an increase in the temporary permit fee. Every dealer should have received that notice, but it will increase the temporary permit from the $11 and change to $12 even. So it's a smaller increase, but that will increase. Also, the issue that has come up with the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division, we've seen ads on TV, is where the governor is encouraging everybody to stay at home and so forth. Can a dealer sell a vehicle from their home or to go to a customer's home to be able to sell that vehicle? And the answer to that you received a notice on as well under the a bulletin from the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division. And that bulletin addresses in the prohibitive acts under section 41.3.210 that says that you can't sell anything other than at your principal place of business. And so the question remains is, can you, if a customer contacts you like a normal internet sale and says, hey, I'm looking at this vehicle on your lot, gone to your website, you negotiate a price over the phone, can you legally go to the customer's home and deliver that and have him sign the documents? Right now we are looking into that. The important part of that is deals with the Department of Commerce and not the Department of Motor Vehicles. The reason that is because we have a 3-day right of rescission law in the state of Utah that says if it's an unsolicited sale, by definition, that the 3-day right of rescission may apply if the dealer's going to the home of his customer to do that sale. We're trying to, we believe at this point that there will probably need to be legislation to address that issue and to make sure that the dealers are in compliance and making sure that we do not fall under the 3-day right of rescission law, because currently vehicles are not an unsolicited sale. People are soliciting the dealers to be able to purchase those vehicles, and we will be having more information that we will be sending out to the dealers in the future. Let me just conclude by, and we're going to keep you under an hour today, but let me just conclude by talking about some of the issues that we need to really stay on top of and why we need your support. One of those big items is the sales tax on trade-ins. There are still discussions on whether dealers should be allowed to give that sales tax trade difference on a motor vehicle. And we know how important that is to the commerce of selling motor vehicles. We know that that's an important process, and it allows people to be able to move and trade vehicles. And particularly in our recreation industry, where some RV dealers are selling hundreds of thousands of dollar priced motorhomes, you can imagine the economic impact that could have if we lose that exemption. So that's going to be a real big issue as the state addresses these tax issues, and particularly with the COVID-19 virus on the tax commission and the legislature addressing tax issues, we want to make sure that we're well protected there. The other project that is going to take place this year is a rewrite of all the rules of the motor vehicle code. We're going to be addressing those, particularly those as it relates to advertising. Some of those are outdated, some of them need to be updated, but we will be doing a massive rewrite of all the rules so that you understand what a rule is. The legislature passes a law that says that you can't, for example, do deceptive advertising. The rule designates what those bad practices are and designates what you can and can't do as far as it relates to advertising. So we will be addressing all of those issues this year. With the COVID-19 virus, this is affecting every part of our life. We are fairly certain that there are going to be some dealers who are going to go out of business, who are going to be out of trust, and there are going to probably be some bonding claims that are going to go on. When that happens, we always see activity at the legislature of increasing the bond or changing that. We have some plans that we're working on as far as bonding and some new solutions for that so that we can still keep all of you in business. So again, if you are a member of the association, thank you for belonging. If you're not, please consider joining. It's a great investment in your business. The last pages in your packet deal with some of our vendors that we use that meet our criteria, and we've gone through and thoroughly vetted them to make sure. The Curtis Vernon Insurance Agency has been fantastic with dealers, and even with the renewal process, they'll help you with your insurance documents for renewal. And there are just a number of things that programs that are available to you as a dealer. So it really is an investment in your dealership to belong. Again, I thank you for being part of our class today. I'm happy to open up the question portal and let's see if anybody has any specific questions on what we talked about today.